what happens after our bodies die. Speaking of hell, tell me about that. Did you experience something like that, this other place? Have you ever experienced psychedelics? I wonder if it compared to the near-death experience. Well, let's jump in. Thank you so much, Bill Letson, for coming on Sauna Sessions. I'm very excited about this conversation because, I feel like the most important questions in this life that we can ask, and it's a shame that most people don't ask, or many people don't ask them. Maybe we do, in the quiet of our beds at night, but we don't really dive into them. And I feel though the most important questions are: who am I? Why am I here? And what happens when I die? And today we have a man named Bill Letson who can answer all three. Many people have theories, but you have been there and come back to tell the story. So I want to say, Bill, thank you for coming on. And let's just jump in. What happens after our bodies die?
So what happens after we die is we sort of slip out of the physical and we go home. We go back to that sea of pure love. We are these conscious thought forms, these energetic beings, and we go back to that wonderful land of pure love where we all hope for it here in this life. But, this is for challenges. This is for us to really dig deep. And while we're living here, get back to that mindset of that eternal being that we are.
Let's jump into your story. You're a retired firefighter, and you have a very interesting story that happened. I think it was in the early 90s. Share with us what happened to you.
I had what's called a near-death experience. And going off of your first question there, the consensus is of the big researchers is that if you really want to know what's going on in the universe and what you're about, talk to the near-death experiencers, the shamanic medicine people, and the people who can get into that deep meditative state, like a trance, where your body feels like a pile of rocks and you're just pouring into someplace else. And what that's all about is realizing that this is a temporary gig. The people that we believe we are these eternal beings. The first one on the list there was the NDE, and that happened to me in 1994. I was working for the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I drove a fire engine. We went to a really sick patient, and I got what she got. We got her to the hospital, and everything turned out good for her. And a few days later, I was on days off, and I was slowly getting super sick. And by the third day, I was, it was life-threatening. I had a really fast pulse. I couldn't get out of bed, and I was super dehydrated, and my blood pressure was tanking. And I knew enough to call for help, and fire department and my family got me into an ambulance, got some IVs, got me to an emergency room, and I came into that emergency room on my knees physically, and some things happened. And if you listen to a lot of these near-death experiencers, these things that happen in hospitals and stuff, they're pretty common. It's not that people are dumb. It's a thin line, being here and not being here. And things happen. So I was in the hospital, and this was a serious flu season. We didn't have pandemics or epidemics or whatever back then. We just called it a serious flu season. And so the place was full of people and kids, and a lot of people had this same flu. In fact, the whole Western United States, there's a number of NDEs that in 94, they got this bug that was really powerful and created an NDE for them. There was a mistake made. A medication was pushed really fast, and I just tanked. I just bottomed out and fell back on the gurney that I was on. And my wife said that, your eyes rolled back, and the medical staff got really freaked out. And so they came in and they gave you Narcan, because part of the drugs they gave you was a Nubane, was a synthetic morphine. And so they Narcaned you, which gobbles up any opiates. And she wrote down 3 times they Narcaned you on 5 and 10 minute intervals. And I wasn't coming back. She said the highest blood pressure she saw was 40 over 0. And they kept the IVs going, got the head down position, and rolled me up to intensive care. And, I didn't know any of this. She filled me in the next day. But sometime during that night, I left my body. I left Bill. And I was flying through this sea of stars. It was this star-filled dimension, and that's all I could call them for years were stars. It seemed like I was in space. And they were multicolored and energetic, and there was emotions coming off them and flow and music, and it was this welcoming. I was being paraded through these stars, and it was just a welcome home. And I just felt amazing. I felt just loved and accepted and joyful. Everything that we have here on Earth, the bottom half of us, the low vibrational half, things like anger and jealousy and all these emotions, they don't exist there. They were not part of anything that I had going on. And I was just this euphoric.
What do you mean they don't exist? Did they just not come to your field of consciousness? Or how did you decipher that they don't even exist there?
They couldn't come into your thoughts. Yeah, they're not part of the spectrum of frequencies that exist in, that pure love universe. Those things, from what I can gather, those things only exist here. And, this is the hardest step. There's many dimensions, many planes, many planets. We have a lot of ways of explaining this, but yeah, this is the hardest one because we take on this form, and through our lives we develop this, this programmed bias of what the world's about, what I'm about, what that guy over there's about, and these emotions just run freely. But if you look at the precession of the equinox, this 24,000 year cycle, where we have a golden age and a silver age and a bronze age, and we are at the bottom. We've just come out of the bottom of an iron age where it's harsh. These are harsh emotions. That's the real universe, is emotions. Our emotional state, our emotional choices, our intentions, what we manifest with our thoughts. That's the real universe. And this physical universe is kind of an amusement park. It's fun to come in here and to pretend to be these guys, and have all these adventures. And, we never die. But part of the heaviness of this place is that we do die. And, we say goodbye to our current character, our current puppet. And it all depends on how well we understand who we really are as far as letting go of this place when it's our time. The NDE and those shamanic things and that deep meditation, that's where that letting go part comes in, because you don't die. You know what this is. So when somebody steals your parking space or cuts you off in line or even at a game, some drunk guy pushes you, and takes a swing at you, you just go, oh, wow, this is cool. All right, I don't want to make his day any worse because he's obviously very, unhappy. And you can just do all those things that, that are in those great teachings, with Buddha and Jesus. And
Yep. One of my favorite quotes from a guru, his name was actually, it's funny, Steve Jobs, his guru was named Paramahansa Yogananda. And he wrote a book that Steve Jobs actually passed out to everyone. He didn't pass it out because he had graduated, he had died, but he made sure everybody at his funeral got this one book. And the book was Autobiography of a Yogi. And Yogananda, amongst other very, I think, awakened beings, has said, consider this world a dream. Consider it a dream. And be done with it, just think of it as a dream and do your dance, but wake up in the dream.
There you go.
And you had a direct experience. See, a lot of people, we have the intellectual experience. A lot of people, we go to the temples and we read scripture and, we listen to the Buddha or whatever, but you actually went there. Keep going, continue, because this is fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. You and I are on the same wavelength, my friend. I had felt like I had been trapped in a hot, dark, stuffy closet. I was held there against my will, and that I had been released from it, and I was this huge, expanded balloon, this huge, expanded cloud. It seemed like I went on forever. And it was just this state of euphoria and ecstasy. It felt like somebody was pouring honey all over my brain, and it was running down through all my nerves and all my sensations, and it was like everything was being tickled and I was giggling. Every cell in me was giggling. I heard an NDE lady say, all my cells were giggling, and I'm like, oh yeah, she's got that. And they were just stoked, just absolutely stoked. And as I was flying along, looking at all these stars going, oh man, this is so cool to be back with whoever I'm back with. And it takes a little while to sort these things out. And as I was flying along, it was like, it kept coming up. How in the world did I forget who I really was? It was such a excellent trick. I was completely fooled, and we are such amazing beings. We are these incredible, expanded beings. And I wasn't somebody who could be fooled with, in my opinion, because I felt like I knew everything. Cruising along, if I thought about any subject, it just came up like super fast pages going by with all this information. And most of it was math. Most of it was geometry and mathematical equations. So yeah, and you hear about the Akashic records and how we can access that. And I've come to realize that's what that was. That you had this full access to this incredible database of knowledge from all these other infinite number of lives that everyone's had.
Can you simplify that for anybody who doesn't know what that is? The Akashic records, what is that?
Apparently that is all information about our life, every life that's ever lived, everything that's ever happened on this planet, every question you could ever have is stored in these Akashic records, which is etched onto the skein of time. It's part of the ethereal plane. On the other side, we have complete access to it. That's what I was experiencing. And it's all information about all lives and all happenings here. I don't know if that goes out into the universe. That would be quite a database.
Wow.
But somebody knows. Somebody can answer that further. But
Amazing. It reminds me of like that. I think it was the Indiana Jones. Maybe it was some other sci-fi movie. He was a villain and he had this skull and he wanted to get all of the information from the skull and then it was just so much that he actually exploded. It was just so when you tell me about everything all the information that exists in the universe, having access to that, yet I don't think the human form obviously couldn't take that. No. We need filters. But as you kind of were, I guess, in this spirit, would you call it spirit form?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were able to access it.
Oh yeah, it was right there. It was part of your, mentation.
Wow.
So as I was thinking about these things and this Akashic records, and I was flying along, and how did I forget who I really was? That kind of went into how is it that I was tricked into believing I was this dude, this guy, this single, this separate, this ego with this whole list of bias of, what's right, what's wrong, who am I, what am I about, what's my future? All those things were a giant illusion. It was a really well done trick or a game or a joke that we play on ourselves. And it wasn't serious at all. All the emotions that we carry, the pain from past relationships and the loss and all that, all of it falls away. In my case, it fell away immediately. And it was like, oh man, that was a really good trick. So yeah, I was flying along and I was just chuckling about all this and thinking, man, that was really something, and trying to sort out where I fit back in to this big picture. And then all of a sudden I landed, just like I went from physical Bill into this huge expanded cloud of awareness. And now I landed in a different place, a different dimension, another plane. And it was a solid place. It was like a medical facility or a clinic. And there were beds there, and it had lighting, indirect lighting. There was equipment there. And there were beings there. Right in front of me, there were these three little guys bouncing around, smiling broadly, and they were overjoyed to see me. They were giggling, and I was just looking at them like, what just happened? And where am I now? And they were smiling from ear to ear, and they were these short little squatty guys, and They were dark in skin and kind of wrinkly, and they had hoods, and they were fun-loving and joyful and playful, almost mischievous. They looked exactly like those guys in the movie Communion. I know that's considered a horror movie, and if you turn the sound off and watch that movie, those guys never do anything horrible. They're bouncing around with Christopher Walken, and they're high-fiving him and joking with him, and there's kids in this facility in this movie, and they're taking care of these kids. That's a very profound scene in that movie, Communion, for me. And people around the world are writing to me, and they're saying, "Oh God, thanks for doing this. I saw these all the time as a kid, and I didn't know what to make of it, or I buried it, or my grandmother said they were standing around, 3 of them were standing around her bed giggling as she, before she passed." I feel pretty good about talking about it. When I first started, it's like, oh man, this is it. Your social status is gonna drop. Yeah, it's helping people. Not everybody has a memory of perceiving them, but I think everybody has these orderlies, these guides, helpers, angels that are following us and making sure we hit our marks in our lives, because we planned it all. It's all scripted. This is where I think alien abduction comes in. We get pulled away. Some energetic form of us gets pulled away and worked on, and then put back in the body. And this is miraculous healings and things like that. And we wake up sometimes and our mind is completely changed on a subject. And I think that those things happen, and they're sitting there and they're bouncing around and giggling, and they're saying things like, "How was it? What did you learn? What can you tell us?" And I was really confused, and one of them came forward and gave me a good going over, checked me out, and turned to the other two and said in a high-pitched kind of munchkin voice, "He doesn't remember us." And they all started giggling uproariously. And I do kind of remember them for this. When I was a kid, I would, at that edge of sleep where you're coming from dreaming and sleeping and waking, that is the doorway to the divine, is that sleepy place just as we're waking up. And I do remember them. My wife even said, "Who are you talking to?" In the morning, I'd be, I wouldn't be back yet, and I'd be giggling like somebody was tickling me. And when we first got married, she was like, "What is going on with you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. There's this, like, playful puppies are all around me, and they're having fun. They're very playful and joyful." They were pretty cool, and they were having a good old time. And then there was this guy in the background.
Just real quick, because
yeah,
this is blowing my mind. So they had a physical form?
Yes, they had a physical appearance.
Okay, a physical appearance. Wow. Okay, and how tall or was that even capable of being understood? Like their height? What used to they were short or?
Yeah, they were short. They were like 4 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah, they were cool. They were kind of clumsy. They kind of, they're kind of bouncing around and bumping into each other and things like that.
And yourself, you didn't have a form.
I don't know what I was. I really don't. And, we can all understand this. We go through our daily jobs and stuff, and we don't really look down and check us. We don't. We just know we're there, and everything's where it should be.
So true.
But I use terms like I saw this and I said that, and it was a seamless transition to that other side. And of course, I wasn't seeing things because I didn't have physical eyes, and I wasn't saying things because I didn't have a mouth and vocal cords and burping out these sounds that we all have agreed that, okay, this means that. But it was just this honest exchange. And that's, I've had a lot of experiences, and it's always an honest exchange, a genuine, authentic exchange. And that's what the other side is. That's why it's so enjoyable, because everything is absolutely authentic and genuine. There's no hiding it. We hide it here because we have these bodies. It's like a projector. We set it up in front of us, and some of us are really good at it. And we become lawyers and CEOs. And
I love the word person comes from the Greek word persona, meaning mask. We wear these masks, don't we? We make them look good, but it's not us. It's not us. As you were talking, I remember this story of when I was a kid. I would look, and this is real quick, I would look into the mirror, and I don't know how old I was. I was super young. but I would look into the mirror and I would say, who is that? That's not me.
A lot of people do that. It's not everybody, but there's a lot of advanced souls, old souls that are having that issue of identity. You got to put yourself in there, Prince. Just the work you're drawn to do is this old soul work in these times. This is very divine calling. And I was doing my NDE talks, 7 or 8 years ago I started, and I knew all the NDEs, a few dozen of them. There was a few groups that you spoke to. But the last year and a half has gone completely crazy. There are hundreds of sites and there are thousands of people coming forward saying, yeah, that happened to me. And they tell their story. And I think humanity is going to, this is the turn from bottoming out, and we're going into and back to an enlightened state. And humanity is going to slowly climb back to this awareness that we are these temporary beings that we're pretending to be. And everybody just does their best because energetically, in the future, energetically, everything's there for everyone else to see. So the politicians and the lawyers are going to be out of work. along with the courts and the jails and the cops, all that stuff will disappear mostly because it's, we can't lie. Our energy gives us away. You can read it.
Wow.
I was just a real quick one. I was watching this guy give a talk, and I loved his talk, and I loved him. But when he was telling a story, he was telling a story about solving all these crimes and stuff. But this huge, and I would go to these meetings because the energy is so good in the room. That creates a vortex when all these people are at their best intentions. It brings the divine into the room. So I would sit there and I'd watch the colors in the room, and I watch things come off people's heads and stuff. But he was up against this flat wall behind him. It was a brown wall, and all of a sudden, this giant form, like a Michelin tire man, this big, bulky looking like snowman thing, appeared on the wall behind him, and it was dancing around, and it was green, and it had this yellow, like a lightning bolt, streaking down and going out on the arms and legs. And it was this giant 10-foot thing. And he was telling this story about how, the cops couldn't figure this out. And he came in and saved the day. And, any of us can say anything. But his energy was telling, that is, that yellow streak. My grandmother would say, oh, he's got a yellow streak down his back. And that means that it's he's behaving cowardly, or he's being dishonest or deceitful. This went on for months afterwards. I told him about it, and he got really nervous. He goes, oh, I've heard that before. He goes, that's really bad. And he wouldn't talk to me. And I'm like, oh, wow. It looked really cool. And then months later, I read this thing with Edgar Cayce, and he said, when you have that yellow streak of lightning energy shooting through this green body, that is a deceitful energy. It's not that he was a bad guy or anything, but at that moment, he wasn't telling the truth. I think that's what the world, how we'll see each other in the future.
Energetically.
Right.
Wow.
But it doesn't happen all the time. So people can, if you see me, don't worry. I'm not looking into your soul. I think things like that just happen so that I'll talk about them, and then people will think about it. And then they'll say, I saw this thing around my mom or something, and this light, and I didn't understand it. And it's like, that's what's going on as the frequency of the planet increases. We got names for that, global warming, whatever, but it's the frequencies going up, and it's going to be cool. And we just have to adapt and go with it, and we'll be fine.
Continue to choose love and wake up inside the dream. All right. So you're in this room, you see the three beings. Tell me what happens next.
The three beings are there, and they're bouncing around. And then there was this tall guy, and he was kind of in the background. He was tall and wispy. I've called him like a trimmed down Gumby or a walking stick insect, or 100 different things. But the most closest thing was he was like a swirling tornado. If you took a glass of water and spun it really fast and then watched that swirl that goes from the top all the way to the bottom, and it kind of dances, and that's what he looked like. And he had this big smile on his face, and it looked like he was underwater. And as he came forward, swirls. Parts of him would separate and move first. The top would move first. The bottom would catch up. It was like this swirling little, dust devil or fire world. There's a lot of these vortexes in our world. We have different names for them, and energetic vortexes. And that's what he looked like. He looked like a spinning little mini tornado. And what was coming off of him was just absolute. I mean, he adored me. He just loved me. He was letting me somewhat get my sea legs, as I was talking to these guys. And then he came forward and big smile on his face and chuckle. It was like a favorite uncle was in the room suddenly. And as he came forward, his energy just really overpowered me. My chest started to expand like it was going to pop, and my throat was constricting, and I felt like I was going to break down in uncontrollable crying on my knees from love. There was so much love coming from this guy that it was paralyzing. It was overwhelming, and I just loved it. And he came forward. Obviously, he was in charge of a lot of things, that place and everybody's place in it. And as he came forward, he was the coolest guy. He just kept kind of chuckling. And every time he laughed, I could feel his laughter inside me, inside my heart. I could feel this chuckling. And he loved me absolutely, unconditionally. I was like a toddler to him. I was like a child, and he was like a father. He came forward, and we went back and forth with a few things. And after a while, I was like, okay, well, I'm in a clinic somewhere, and I don't need to stay here. There's a big, beautiful universe out there. I just was there a second ago. So I said, okay, you guys, I'm never going back to Bill, ever. I'm not going back there. And, eventually I'm going to leave this facility, whatever it is. So what's next? Do we do a review of my life? Would you guys like to get started with that? And he just cracked up. He thought that was hysterical, that this little toddler was trying to take over. And anybody who has kids knows exactly what I'm talking about. They hit a certain age, and it's like, well, let's do this, Dad. So he was cool. He was a cool father, and he just was chuckling, and then he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? I kind of started, but I was like, wow, I won that one. So I started telling stories about different things with my wife. And it wasn't a real life review. I wasn't looking at things in the past. I wasn't evaluating the profound effect that I've had on others, or what my words, how they harmed others. It wasn't all those things that people talk about. It was kind of a fake review of my life, and kind of humored me. And I talked about a few things, no big regrets. And then right in the middle of one of them, he just says, okay, that's enough. Time to go back. And I was like, go back? I was floored. I was like, dude, no way. There's no way. And it was almost like, you don't understand. It's really rough down there. And I had an incredible life. I won big at everything, and, family and career and wife. And I didn't have a rough life at all. But to be saddled with the emotions, the energies of this plane is incredibly crushing for us. So I pleaded with him, and he goes, no, you have to go back, and you got things to do, and they're important. I tried a few more things, and he said, okay, it's time to go back. And he came forward, and, from his intention, I felt the place just starting to dissolve, started to break up, and he started to turn into a mist, and I just sort of dropped away from that dimension. I left that channel, and my consciousness, whatever, it was dropping in frequency rapidly, like devastatingly. And I was dropping back down to the earth realm. Thing I remember was I was somewhere near my body, ready to get back near my body. And it was a really crushing place. It was lonely, and it was dismal, and it was full of fear, and nothing like where I had just been. The two other dimensions or realms There was nothing comparable to either the realm that's right next to where we are in the physical. Either that was it, or it was reemerging into the energy of Bill and all of those toxic memories or things that he carried. And, all those things, fear and guilt and anxiety and all those things that are human, all those things just came pouring back into my awareness. And it was a really horrible feeling to be back in that. So, yeah, I just want to let everybody know that when we pass, we drop all of it behind. It's not believable, but we do. We leave all of it behind, and it doesn't mean anything. It's all just a game. It's all just a joke. So, yeah, I was back in my body, and I slowly woke up. The blood pressure machine would squeeze my arm, and I'd wake up, and I'd see different numbers. And it went over a few hours. I saw everything increasing, improving. And I was kind of sitting up, looking around, and a nurse walked by, and she was shocked. She's like, "You're awake?" And I said, "Yes, I am. And I need to talk to you." And she said, "We didn't know what was happening to you. We had no idea why you were so close to not coming back." And she said, "I have to go find the doctor. He's going to be stoked. You come back." And I said, "Okay, you can go get the doctor. But first, what am I doing back here?" I was pissed. And I said, I was home. I was home with my best bros. How in the world did I get back here? And I said, I had bought the farm and I was convinced of it. There was no doubt I was dead. And she said, "Honey, you've been in escrow, but you fell out of escrow and now you're back with us and you need to get your head around that." And, she looked me right in the eye. And that was a really good thing to hear because I didn't keep running off into that fit of despair. She gave me an order and she grounded me. And that with a lot of NDEs, if you talk to NDEs, a lot of them will tell you I was in this funk for months, years. Some people say decades. It leads to addiction, and you're just trying to escape the heaviness of this place because there's something way better out there, and you just want to go back. Anyway, the doctor came, and I'm just like la 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 la, all this stuff. Oh, this happened. This guy. That. I told everybody. My parents came, and everybody thought I'd lost it, but I felt that was what I was supposed to do. And when I got back to work, all the guys were like, "Hey, I heard you had something." All the fire guys, they were like, "I heard you had something really cool happen." And I tell them everything I just told you, especially the religious guys. They wanted to hear there was a guy with a beard and long robes and harps and everything was wonderful. And when they didn't hear that, it was upsetting to them. And they're like, "Well, that dude's crazy." What's interesting, this guy wrote a comment in one of those videos, and he said what Bill went to was right out of Hinduism. And there is a laughing king that he met with, and he had a name. This is all in Hinduism after we die. And there are these three little funny, clumsy guys that are little dumpy guys. This is a big part of the Hindu beliefs in the afterlife. And I thought that was a really good comment. That was because that's what I saw. I was just being, that's all I've ever done is been complete, honest recall of what I experienced. And, there's clues out there that this isn't one old guy's, dream.
Mm.
After a while, I stopped talking about it because the fire department's like, we can't have our firemen sounding like lunatics. So you want to button it up. And so I zipped it for like 15 years. Mm. And when I retired, something drew me to go look for answers. And so that's a whole nother thing.
Wow. Yeah, there's, you said so much. Thank you for sharing that. I haven't had an experience like yours, but I've been a researcher, and I know if people do think that you sound crazy or we sound crazy, there's tons of studies, empirical studies that they can research and just look for. There's a book by Ian Stevenson, I believe, Children Who Remember Previous Lives. There's statistical evidence of things like this. So, the human ego sometimes is tough to, the human ego it wants to survive. It wants this to be, it's hard to open its mind to love, I guess you could say. And I think the story that you shared is so powerful. And you just mentioned the comment of the Hindu tradition. And one thing that popped up into my mind when you were speaking, I was wondering if you held any religious beliefs prior to your experience, and if you hold any after your experience.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with that. And when you start making your own decisions, you become a teen, and I just kind of pulled away from it. And I tried to, during college and stuff, people would take me to Christian gatherings, and none of it really fit. Where it fit was in nature, and that's why I, became like a forest ranger and a forester, and I just wanted to be out in a natural world. There's a lot of answers in the natural world for anybody looking. You get your bare feet on that magnetic Mother Earth, and you look to the sun, the source of all energy, the Great Spirit. And between those two, they connect. This is why plants are so prevalent. They've got their roots in the ground and their leaves reaching up to the Great Spirit, the source energy.
Yeah.
And everything comes together when you get back in nature. And all these, a lot of NDEers, they find themselves in this incredible valley with water flowing and trees, and the grass is alive and it's tickling their feet, and as above, so below. This is part of creation. We are part of creation. And so, as far as the second part of your question, what do I do now with religion? And I think all of them are part of what I think. And humanity is trying its hardest to understand this very profound predicament we are in. This human existence. And they're trying their best. And, we are imperfect beings. And if you and I were given $1 billion to start a world religion, I'd have it screwed up before lunch. I'd be saying we all got to own 2 dogs, or you're not in the religion. Yeah, that's what I think has happened. You get this blank slate, and people go crazy.
Yeah. Well, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Somebody once said. Speaking of hell, tell me about that. Did you experience something like that, this other place?
I think I did. And we talked about this thing earlier with, leaving your body and this time of death type of thing. And I think there's this movie, it's called Astral City. And that story is exactly what I saw. It's very famous because of the channel that wrote the book, and he was channeling it from spirits that had gone on. The premise was that there is a heavenly place that we aspire to, and there is a earthly place that we are here now in, and there's an in-between place where we are having these many lives, and we're coming back to earth and trying to break this cycle of rebirth by our development, our core soul development. Then there's this other place that we don't want to go, and that's to your question about hell. And I think in this movie, when this guy first dies, he's in this place, and it's right out of fire and brimstone. Just these wild beasts everywhere, and people doing horrible things. And it's in our religions, that we have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We have to walk through this dimension, this frequency, where people didn't really, when they're in this life, they got very confused. They're in this very low vibration dimension, and anything goes there. I have this thing going on with Kundalini, and when I close my eyes just for a few minutes, I can peel away, and I'm in that place. And there are a lot of, sometimes it's quite remarkable what they look like, or something, grabs you. Nothing can harm you, but something will be suddenly in your face and, maybe trying to choke you or something. But you can just ignore it and move on. And that's what I think this hell realm is as we leave, we have to realize who we really are and keep our wits about us and walk through this valley of the shadow of death and not get caught up with some fear thing or some bit of uncertainty. And then we move into these other realms. And that's exactly what Edgar Cayce used to do when he'd go into, to give a reading, he'd go into a trance and he would find himself a tiny dot of light outside of his body. And he knew he had to follow the light to stay safe. And he would move through these lower realms that were places of nightmares, just incredibly scary things. And he just stayed with the light and followed it to this Jacob's ladder, and then went up, this ladder and went through these other levels. He talks all about each level as he would go to the Akashic records to get a reading. And the interesting thing, making this full circle, is when he would get on that Jacob's ladder, he would pass these little hooded gnomes and elves, and they were, they're keeping order between the dimensions. And he said they had really dark robes at the bottom and light robes as it went up. They got lighter and lighter. So yeah, that dimension is there. The hell dimension is there. It's chaotic. It's absolute, incredible, energetic fear can just pound you to the ground. Like you said, we have to wake up in this life and realize who we are. This is the whole story. Realize who we are, and then kind of effortlessly, fearlessly, just walk through that valley and head home to, the divine.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, if anybody's interested, Edgar Cayce, fascinating, Sleeping Casey, they used to call him, fascinating stories. I highly recommend reading some of his books. Bill, I have been really a fan of all religions and spiritual traditions, and I know all of them really come down to love. The Hindu traditions particularly spoke to me, connected with me. I spent a lot of time in India, but all of them I just love dearly, because when you look at the foundation of all religions, it is, we are one. All is love. Love is the most important thing. But when it comes to death, the Buddhist and the Hindu traditions have a lot of texts on it, a lot of books. The Tibetan book on living and dying, I've read front to back. It's a powerful book. One thing that I believe is true, they say, is that the last thought that you have before you transition will dictate where you go. So this is why when Mahatma Gandhi was shot, and if you go to India, you hear people, you see people say Ram, 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 which is the name of God. And when Gandhi was shot, those were his last words. It was Ram, it was the name of God. And so to cultivate that amount of mindfulness, that amount of presence while we're here, because they say you die like you lived. So if you lived a very fearful, angry life, then you kind of die kicking and screaming. But my message for everybody listening, I think it's similar to yours, is to cultivate that presence awareness that actually we are not this body. We are something beyond. We are love. And to try to keep that thought in our minds as much as possible, because you never know when the last moment will be.
That's really good stuff, Prince. That's really good. Thanks for that.
Yeah. Well, how do you, I know we're almost out of time, but I'd love to know, how do you view the current state of the world? How do you view the news, for instance? How do you view things like greed and selfishness, some of the lesser parts of humanity?
Well, the news, everything's our choice. And just like those dimensions out there that, your energy is going to dictate where you go. And if you want to turn on the news, and it's, which channels they are, and get all that horrendous information, then that's your choice. And, you can watch, movies that uplift you, like The Wizard of Oz or something, or you can watch somebody, blowing 200 holes in somebody else. And there's all these movies, these moving screens, they have an effect on us. It goes right into our subconscious and it becomes us. So yeah, it's free will, and we are, as Tom Campbell puts it, and his stuff is amazing. He says he calls us free will awareness units. We're these temporary avatars, and
Cool.
then we go back to this. Well, anyway, it follows the whole thing with a person and a soul and a higher self and a greater connected universe. He uses like software terms, and he calls it a greater consciousness system. That would be God. But it's really good. And yeah, okay. So to answer your question, we have free will. We are these free will awareness units,
Mm,
and you can go outside and plant fresh food in your garden and take care of it, or you can go online and watch people shooting people in other countries, and
mm.
it's up to you. Until that stuff is at your front door, you probably should leave it alone.
Yeah. Wow. Well said. So, there's a big boom, I think, that's happened when it comes to plant medicine. So I know Terrence, when you were talking about the elves, I was just thinking about the great Terrence McKenna. He talked about the machine elves that he saw and came into contact with during his trips. Have you ever experienced psychedelics? I wonder if it does it compare to the near death experience, or have you just read stories, or what's your relationship?
Yeah, I told you in 2010 I retired, and then this whole thing with the near death experience came rushing in, and that included, I didn't even know why I was doing it, but I was kept getting on planes and going to Central America and driving around, and pretty soon I was off the paved roads, and then I was off the dirt roads, and then I was on the trails in the villages. And yeah, I got with some really incredible shaman. Taito Juanito, he's out of Colombia. These are tiger shaman. They make an ayahuasca, which is called yahe, and it's like a big chocolate malt. It's not a tea. It's incredibly powerful. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I did do the ayahuasca a handful of times. And I'll just say right now, most people, it's a big number, 98%. Most people have a harsh time, because it is a separation of the ego. Like you said, that is a huge step that we make, and it's not an easy step. It's a lot of suffering involved in our lives, and in those ceremonies. You can have the suffering in one night of a lifetime, and I kind of went through that. Just this, hours of being in these waves of fear. I still had my wits about me, but it was just pouring through me. But it did clear. They, the guys, his assistants and stuff. They at one point they said, "You're going to have to find the courage to surrender to the softer you," because that's what ayahuasca does. It opens up, the soul and the higher self, and you, and your conscious form that you're in, and you're bouncing between these during an ayahuasca ceremony. You are moving between these perspectives, and it is it is remarkable. But most people never realize that that's what happened. I didn't for a long time. Yeah, so those medicines, everything's vibration, and there are plants, there are chemicals in this world that when we ingest them, we become that vibration for some hours, some minutes, until our body metabolizes it and we return to normal. There's a whole bunch of those things in there with the psilocybin and all these things. They have a vibration that connects with this pineal gland, activates the seat of the soul, which is the pineal gland. It activates that sucker, and we move into other dimensions. Our consciousness, our energetic core of who we really are, those dimensions open up to us for a short time. In that regard, those medicines are incredibly powerful. Mostly today, people think it's a drug, it's a recreation, but it really isn't. It's a doorway into the divine side of you. So I just say this is because I had the near death experience, and I did the ayahuasca a few times, and it's rough. It's like you're not in charge anymore. You, the, the person, the person that you have always known to be is tied and gagged and thrown in the trunk. And this higher version of you is driving for a few hours, and you sit in that trunk and you kick and scream and, for hours until you say, "Oh, that's me." And you relax. I said this when I had my near-death experience. I had this euphoria. It was I called it a cosmic orgasm. And when you find the courage to surrender to that higher version of you, that higher self, that energy came flooding back in, and it was like just like my near-death experience. Every cell was giggling, and the vibrations. I was bouncing on the ground, and I was doing my best to stay in this dimension because everything inside of me was connected to and wanted to go home. And that's how remarkable these medicines are. These shamans, they're not a bunch of Goombas in the jungle.
Mm,
And neither were the Egyptians or the Mayans. This DMT thing. It's a shortcut to what our body naturally does.
mm, yeah, and I love the fact that you said it. It's not a recreational thing. It's something that's a connection with the divine and should be honored, respected, and really you go into it with your heart. Thank you so much for sharing that. Bill, I wanted to ask you because our time is about up. But where can people keep in touch with you? Do you have any books out, websites, social media? If somebody was interested in getting into contact with you or hearing more about your story, where can they go?
They can write to me, and I'm B Letson, Letson, 56 at Gmail. And, I get lots of emails every day. And I'll write back. I'll send you stuff. But I'm not in business, and I'll put this all. I had a book years ago, but everything, things continue to open when you move with this heartfelt intention. It just continues to open and open and open. And, I got to put that into words.
Mm,
So I'll get to it.
mm. Awesome. Awesome. Well, people need to hear it. You're such a relatable person, and you speak so eloquently about your experience, and it really is inspiring. And so I think everybody who's listening to this, they feel better because we're all going to go through it. We all have family members who may have gone through it, but you kind of you've been there. You've kind of you've experienced it, and you came back to tell the tale. You say death is perfectly safe. I love the fact that you said we came from, or actually you didn't say this, but I thought this when you were talking, how you saw all the stars. You were just filled with all these stars, and every astrophysicist will tell you that every atom in our body comes from a star that exploded. We are stardust. And it's so fascinating. So thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate you coming on Sauna Sessions. To everybody listening to this, make sure you leave a comment, rate the episode, and tune in next week for another episode of Sauna Sessions. Thanks for tuning in.